Welcome back to the Accel Advantage podcast, where we discuss insurance and financial services for our business leaders. I am your host, Corey Rekers, partner and president of our property casualty division here at Accel. Today, our guest is Taylor Bierl. Taylor is an employee engagement specialist here at the Accel Group, and we're going to discuss the topic of employee engagement, what it is, and why it's so important for our company or any company, big or small. Now, Taylor is new to us here at Accel, but definitely not new to the world of HR and specifically how organizations can do a better job of engaging their employees. So ultimately, you want to become an employer of choice, right, for the communities that we serve. Taylor is going to take us through how we do that today. So before we begin and dive into our discussion for better engagement, let's get to know Taylor. So Taylor, first off, welcome. Can you share a little bit about yourself and how you got into the world of communication and employee engagement?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Taylor. I live in Urbandale with my husband and our Belgian Malinois Murphy. My background is a little bit unique. I attended Abilene Christian University, where I earned my bachelor's in communication sciences and disorders with a minor in family studies. And traditionally, that's a path toward the speech language pathology program. But as I went through that program, what I really found fascinated me the most was how people communicate and feel seen and understood. And so in 2019, I started working at a staffing firm, and I actually started there as the front desk associate. And it was a great way just to get my foot in the door and see how the business operated and get to know the staff there. Then in 2020, when COVID hit, everything changed. And so I got the opportunity to help with HR and I fell in love with it. And so my biggest priority and goal at that time was really helping people stay connected with each other in a remote environment. It was challenging, but also rewarding, and we learned a lot. And over the past 5 years, I've really focused heavily on employee engagement and making people feel seen and heard, understood, connected. And when you can do that, it really helps to create positive workplaces where people want to stay because they love their job and they love who they work with and who they work for. And making people feel valued is really the key to that employee engagement. So that's what I love the most about it.
That's awesome. Really perfect segue into a lot of the things that we want to hit on today. So before that, you said something that I'd like to dig into a little bit because you have quite a bit of experience with this, which would be engaging employees in remote work environments because you got to do that right at the beginning of COVID. So I'd like to touch on that because that's really where you got your start. Obviously, a very challenging time to basically jump into the deep end during COVID, but I'm sure that led to some pretty creative ways that you reached out to employees, that you engaged them, and really giving them a voice during a pretty, I would say, very challenging time. So could you share a little bit about what you learned, especially now where it pertains to employers that are really, a lot of us are still in a hybrid environment like we are here at Accel.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's crazy how, I mean, in 2020, it was such a wild time, and people that had never worked remotely before were suddenly stuck at home. And so, what we did was we created a group that we called the Fun Club, real inventive. But our whole goal was, and it was just people who wanted to be on it. Like, if you wanted to be a part of it, you were welcome to be. But really, the goal was just to figure out how to keep that connection going. And so, yeah, it took some trial and error, but we got really creative and we would do things like online Jeopardy or online bingo. And just, if you win, you get a $5 gift card. And really getting people to engage with turning their cameras on and doing little group activities. So, one thing we did that always stuck out in my mind was we sent out little kits to create like little Halloween candies together. Some groups did like baking pretzels. And so, it was just a time when people weren't in that face-to-face reality, but we were creating that environment remotely. And so then another thing that worked well was our leaders started meeting with each person individually every couple of weeks. And not just to talk about work, but really just to check on how they were doing personally. And honestly, I think it was a combination of all of those things that made a huge difference because we were really able to keep almost our entire team through that time. And I really believe it's because people felt seen and supported. There was definitely some challenging aspects, like I mentioned, some trial and error. because not everyone's going to feel seen and valued in the same ways. So while one person may really love to be a part of the group baking pretzels, another person may feel more seen, on a one-on-one meeting, discussing like a mentorship program, discussing a book that they're reading together, or exploring their career path. And that takes time, but also takes really knowing and investing in your people as leaders, and just kind of doing the trial and error, like I mentioned. It takes leaders really meeting their people where they're at. And I think that rings true today, especially in hybrid or remote settings.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We're all very different. So thank you for sharing that, because I feel like you having to jump in and kind of manage that right away in your new role in your past company. I'm sure you had to get pretty creative to hit on all the different personalities and types of people that you were working with. Not that long ago, I was reading an article that basically said, I think it was Gallup that I read it through. Companies with highly engaged employees see about a 21% higher profitability and approximately 59% less turnover than those with less engaged employees. Makes sense, right? So significant difference, especially when it comes to today's market, where I think you and I both can agree talent's pretty hard to find. It can be very, very hard to keep. What's been your experience with that as an engagement specialist, and what are you starting to see as the major contributors to getting people engaged at work, getting them to want to stay, and also contribute to their company's cause? So a lot there, but I'd love to kind
Yeah.
of get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that statistic play out firsthand in my experience, because engagement is not just, it's more than just perks or benefits, although those are really important. Obviously, it's a big piece of the puzzle. But at its core, really, engagement focuses on three different things: connection, trust, and purpose. The first one, which I think is the number one contributing factor to getting people to stay, is having strong empathetic leadership, which really touches on that connection piece. People want to work for leaders that care about them, not just professionally, but personally too. And as an example, one experience that has really stuck with me is when I was working for a company, we were experiencing just some low level satisfaction with our leadership and the company in general. And so we really shifted our focus internally to investing in our managers and making sure that they had the tools and the training that they needed to be able to lead with empathy and come alongside their team members and really coach them instead of direct them, to be able to learn how to listen more actively. And so that proved to be beyond valuable, because each month we had leaders on their one-on-ones ask a very specific question, which was, is there anything I can be doing better to support you? And that simple question really opens the door for an employee to feel heard and to be honest. And we actually, at the end of that year, we were voted as one of the top best places to work by our people. And I think that that really helped to make that connection with the leadership. Another factor that I think contributes is having trust and autonomy. We find that those who are most engaged are often those who feel empowered to do their job without feeling that micromanaged piece. You want to feel trusted to be able to do your job and do your job well. And so that's a key piece between managers and their team members. And then the last one that I mentioned is purpose. People want to go to work for a company where they know what they're doing matters. And the way to involve them in that is to make sure that they know the mission, vision, and core values of your company. When they can resonate where you're going and it resonates with them personally, they're going to be more engaged. And one thing I love that the Accel group does is every new hire gets a picture frame with our core values. And so they can always keep that in mind on their desk, where we are, who we are, why we do what we do, where we're going. Because if people don't feel connected to that mission, their team, or leadership, they'll disengage or leave. So those are kind of some contributing factors that I feel like help people stay engaged.
Yeah, you fit in so well with what we're trying to do with our mission, our vision, and our core values. And so we've certainly worked really hard on those to incorporate them into our culture. And we do spend a tremendous amount of time and energy in making those values lived out and rewarded. So obviously there's always room for improvement. That's one of the reasons why you're here. But continuously being intentional for any employer, I think, is a great first step. So that said, I do know those that are listening may have some questions on, why this matters so much. And you already kind of hit on a few of those examples from a top-down leadership perspective. But beyond kind of what you already shared, can you, in your own words, kind of give us how you've seen engagement impact cultures?
Yeah, definitely. To me, employee engagement is about how emotionally and mentally invested an employee is in their work and in the organization as a whole. So it's not just about being happy, it's about being connected, motivated, committed to the cause and the vision. And when they're engaged, they're not just doing the bare minimum or showing up just to get a paycheck. They're contributing their ideas, they're taking initiative, they're genuinely caring about the success of the company as a whole. There's a quote from Brene Brown that says, people want to do work that matters for leaders who make them feel like they matter. And when people feel valued, that's the key to employee engagement because they have that emotional investment. And in a world where people are really reevaluating what they want from work, engagement is really no longer optional. It's essential to your company's success. And that kind of mindset, when people aren't just there, like I mentioned, to get a paycheck, it's contagious and it spreads. And it really makes an impact on your culture, drives innovation, builds resilience in times of change, and it keeps your customers coming back because the people serving them actually care. And you can have a good strategy on paper all you want, but if the people working for you aren't aligned, then it's not going to work well. And conversely, when you have engaged employees who are on track with your mission and emotionally invested, you build that loyalty, reduce costly turnover, and create a really fun, amazing environment for people to come be a part of.
Yeah, I incredibly well said. I agree with all that, Taylor. What's interesting to me as we kind of continue to work with, I would say, different generations and really trying to assess and deliver what all of our teammates value. What I've continued to learn is that really everyone is different. And you've hit on that a couple times now, just everyone being unique in what they're looking for. What I see as a priority with what you do is making sure everyone is heard, even understood, and that they feel that they have what they need to be successful in whatever that role is, and continue to check in as their needs do change over time. Now that I've been doing this for a while, I've been in the workforce more than I've been alive. So I can honestly say that my personal wants and needs are very, very different now than they were when I was in my 20s or my 30s. And so what I value is different, and aligning those values with an organization that shares similar values is very important to me personally, just like I'm sure it is for most. But the challenge that you have is everyone does have different things that they're looking for. So you got to make sure that you can kind of cater to that to folks. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and we talked about why it's important to have a culture of engagement. What do you see as some of those barriers for our listeners who are trying to create that culture of engagement for their teammates? You have some ideas to break through and really drive some of the results that they're looking for?
Yeah. So there's a few different things that I've seen come up that can create challenges. I would say the number one is lack of meaningful recognition. No one likes to feel like what they're doing isn't appreciated or seen. And when you don't feel appreciated, of course, your motivation's going to drop. So that's a dangerous one because it's often a silent disengager. So people will stop engaging, but they may not say anything. But the best part about this is the good news is that it's incredibly easy to fix and it's free. A simple thank you or a public shout out can go a long way. And people want to feel like the work that they're doing is noticed. So one thing that the Accel group does really well, I feel like, is using Nectar, which is a peer-to-peer recognition platform where anyone in the organization can send each other points that eventually can be redeemed for gift cards or merch or fun things like that, and then with a quick shout out. And this really helps foster the engagement between each other and gives people that value and recognition that they really need. So that's a great way to prevent that challenge. Another challenge I've seen come up before is unclear communication and expectations. People need clarity on expectations and goals and how they fit into the bigger picture of the organization. So The way to improve communication are things like weekly team check-ins, clear expectations during those meetings, and feedback loops matter. Creating the space for employees to voice their opinions can also build that trust and engagement. One thing that we do here at the Accel Group is we have a Ask Us Anything form on our intranet, and it allows employees to anonymously bring questions and concerns to leadership, and that's answered on our bi-weekly team huddles. So it's, you can come ask us anything and the leadership is going to address it. That's a great way to prevent that challenge too. And then the last one I've seen that can be a big issue is the lack of leadership buy-in. Engagement starts and ends with leadership. And if the leadership team doesn't understand or value engagement, employees won't be engaged either. And it will negatively affect the culture and productivity, all the things that go along with that. So managers set the tone, really. And when leaders are transparent and supportive and consistent, engagement follows. And it's really vital to have that buy-in when it comes to engagement. And some leaders may see it as a nice to have, but in reality, it's truly a business priority.
How do you get leaders to buy in for those engagement initiatives? Especially, I know you may not see the return on your quote unquote investment immediately. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so really emphasizing that engagement is directly tied to business metrics like turnover costs, productivity, or customer satisfaction. Showing leadership that disengagement is costing them money or talent, that really brings that point home. Sharing employee feedback with leadership is huge too, so that they can really see the real impact of their actions. That's really helpful. That's one reason why it's really important to encourage employees to provide that feedback so that real change can be applied.
Awesome stuff. What about, and I think you probably alluded to this earlier, we probably call it what, quiet quitting,
Mm-hmm.
where things aren't exactly on fire. There's no fire alarms going off, but you can definitely feel an undertone of complacency. From your experience, what are some of maybe the early warning signs to look for in a team or a teammate who might be disengaged?
Yeah. So, well, some of the red flags you're going to want to look for are decreased participation. Maybe they're turning their camera off more, or they're missing deadlines, or you're noticing some lower quality work, or even increased absenteeism. It can also show up in a few more subtle ways, like withdrawing from conversations or becoming less responsive. If a whole team is quiet in meetings or resistant to change, that's usually a sign.
Yeah, that's for me. That would be like the kiss of death. I do like when people are more engaged and challenge, and I think when people do start to, I wouldn't say give up, but they do start to just not engage a lot in the conversations or act as if they care what happens. So all those are, I would say, like table stakes and making sure that you know kind of what's going on from a culture standpoint. A lot of great information, a lot of takeaways here. Taylor, do you have, I mean, like maybe a bare minimum where someone can start with their engagement with their team? What would that be?
Yeah, I would say it really just starts with building trust with your people and showing genuine interest in them. Ask for input and listen actively and then follow through. You've got to recognize effort and not just outcomes. And really, consistency is key. Be consistent with your communication and make space for them to provide feedback. They engage more when they feel seen and supported as a person, professionally and personally.
So let's talk about employee feedback. So what tools do you think can be used to kind of gather that feedback so employers can respond better to what employees are saying, or maybe more importantly, what they're not saying? What are some other things too that they can do?
Yeah, so feedback is essential because it's your engagement thermometer, but it only works if employees trust that their voices are going to be heard and lead to action. So organizations need to kind of close the loop on that, where they share what was heard and what's changing and why. Even if you can't act on every single thing, being transparent about the why builds that trust that we talked about. I think having one big annual engagement survey is helpful for the big picture stuff, but pairing that with shorter pulse surveys every few months is where you really start to get a gauge on what's working and what's not. So it keeps a real-time pulse on how people are feeling day to day, and it shows them that you're actually listening and adjusting as needed. One thing I've seen work well in the past is using the employee NPS score survey. So It's a metric that gauges how likely employees are to recommend their organization as a great place to work. It's derived from the NPS score, which is used for customer satisfaction. But this one focuses on asking employees a single simple question on a scale of 1 to 10. How likely are you to recommend your company as a workplace? And so from there, based on your responses, you can gauge how happy your employees are and who's at risk for leaving. It really helps you see those areas for improvement, and sending that out every few months is just a great way to keep that pulse on engagement. So the other benefit about that is that it's quick, so employees are much more likely to fill out something that's fast where they can just click a number, as opposed to like a long survey that we do annually, which is important too.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had not heard of using that NPS score as a way to re-engage, and then obviously utilize those scores to better get folks to engage in our culture. So interesting. We'll have to dig into that one a little bit more. Where do you see the future engagement? Where is it headed? Obviously, we've got all this talk right now about AI and GPT, and I think a lot of folks are a little uneasy about kind of where we're headed with some things, especially still working in some hybrid remote environments. Kind of where do you see that heading?
Yeah. Well, I think we're moving towards more personalized engagement where people really want more flexibility. There's that huge emphasis on work-life balance. They want to feel connected to a purpose of something bigger than themselves, and they want connection on their own terms. So hybrid and remote work has changed how we build culture. And so we need to be even more intentional about inclusion, communication, and relationship building. People want to work for companies that align with their values and respect their time and care about them as whole people, not just workers. So I think that's key to that personalized engagement.
What do you think we as employers get wrong with this?
I would say a big mistake is treating this as a one-time thing, like a survey, or you do one fun office event, and that's just not enough. It has to be constant and ongoing because it's embedded in the culture, the leadership, the communication, and the processes of the company.
Okay, you've left us a lot to think about. Give us one small action that an employer can take and run with right after this podcast.
Sure. So a simple question of what's one thing I can do to better support you? And then actually listen, because it's going to open up that conversation. It's going to build that trust, and it shows that you genuinely care without needing a big budget or a formal program.
Taylor, thank you. A lot of takeaways for our business owners and our HR specialists to implement today. Obviously, engagement is not a means to an end, but really more of a journey. So appreciate you hitting on all of that today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Some of my big takeaways, having an open mind. I think that's really, really important in this. Being able to listen to your team, really, really listen to them. Being able to ask maybe the open-ended questions, even if at times we may not like the answers. And so we can do a better job to support folks in their roles. All these are outstanding items we can continue to kind of build off of. All right. Well, hey, everyone, thanks for listening today. Like always, be sure to check us out at acceladvantage.com or accelwealthmanagement.com. And please make sure to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. Please leave us a review and subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. Lastly, we'd love that you'd share this with anyone that you know could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge we learned today from Taylor regarding employee engagement. Remember, at the Accel Group, we've been helping individuals and businesses protect what matters most for nearly 100 years, and that's the Accel Advantage.